Thanks for everyone for coming. This is a panel discussing innovation ecosystems, and I know that's probably two different buzzwords that are used most frequently in our business put together. It's unique. But I think one of the things that is probably coming to light more than anything else over the last 5 years is the interaction between the public and private partnerships. It needs to, and I think the industry understands, fill a void between university and commercial, what I'll call the commercial markets, i.e. VC, anything like that. So the interesting thing is that we've got a number of different types of ecosystems represented here that will allow those kinds of conversations to happen and facilitate any expertise and capital interaction that's required. So I think one of the things we wanted to do is to talk about, for everyone, to talk about kind of what they've done, what they're doing, and what they see as kind of some of the new changes going forward within their particular domain, such that it may resonate with other folks in other areas, if that makes sense for everyone. Because I know we can go either all day, or this can go all over the place, and then I don't want to keep it too focused, because I think we can get to a lot of things. And then I want to make sure that people please save some questions, and most of this conversation I want to be interactive. So why don't I let everyone introduce themselves, give them a real short little version of kind of who they are and what they do. Stephanie.
Hi.
Kick it off.
Thanks for the intro. So my name is Stephanie Robertson, and I work for Johnson & Johnson Innovation. For those of you who don't know the Johnson & Johnson Innovation model, it's a geographically focused effort for J&J to provide a door into J&J. We're a huge conglomerate of companies, actually. We've got consumer, med device, pharma, and so having a way to essentially be a front door is really key. And J&J really does believe that 99% of innovation is probably happening outside our doors, and so it's really important to figure out how to engage externally. Under that umbrella, we've got actually every sector sitting in one place. So we have sites in Boston, we have one in San Francisco, we have one in London and one in Shanghai, and as I said, so they really cover those geographical regions. We also have footprints under that umbrella that are incubators called J-Labs. So we have a couple in the Bay Area. We have one here in San Diego, in La Jolla. We have one in Boston, one in Toronto, one in Houston. Am I forgetting? There's one that's launching in New York. And then there's also an incubator called J-Links over in Europe, and other places where we're thinking about geographically expanding. And that's really just an effort to establish, take some of the roadblocks out for startups. It takes care of, you're paying month to month, just renting the space you need. It might just be a bench or a desk. You got access to great equipment. Somebody else is dealing with all of the things that have to do with just operating a building and the infrastructure associated with that. So it really lets companies just hit the ground running and not have to worry about some of these other details. And it actually, speaking of ecosystems, it's an ecosystem. You've got a lot of companies that sit together, and so they really can take a lot of learnings from each other. Some are totally new entrepreneurs, some have been around the block several times, and so you get a really great community engagement there that can help each other figure out how to build up their companies. I think we have an investment arm that's part of that as well. So one of the things that we do is we can engage kind of on any front that makes sense for whether it's an academic partnership or a startup or later stage biotech. So it's a pretty innovative model, I would say, in terms of how to engage, and can definitely get into I think what we've done in terms of helping seed and build ecosystems in places that are starting to grow and have an innovation ecosystem like Houston and like Toronto. I'd love to talk more about that. We've got them scheme from the Mars Discovery District where we have one of our incubators. So anyway, I will let Travis introduce
Great.
himself as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Travis McCready. I'm the President and CEO of the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. We are I can say we were a $1 billion economic development and scientific investment agency in Massachusetts to invest in the life sciences, but we are reaching the conclusion of our 10-year $1 billion. And just this morning, our governor announced his intention to recapitalize us with another $500 million over 5 years. Yes,
Hey.
so thumbs up. Thank you.
That's great.
That's great news.
So I have a little pocket money out here. We've taken the approach of investing in, like Stephanie said, in capital infrastructure, removing the capital barriers, the actual physical barriers to innovation, by investing in incubators. One of the J Labs is located at M2D2, which was a facility that was funded by us. We have invested almost $300 million in capital infrastructure at our higher education institutions. And one of the most successful things that we've done with those investments is make it conditional upon receiving our funds that these facilities that we build must be open and available to the broader private sector. For those scientists that don't have the pocket change to build a $5 million cryo-EM facility, well, we just built one at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center in Worcester, and Massachusetts scientists get access to that facility. So that's been really helpful for scientists coming and attracting scientists to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have investment funds. We were imbued with the authority and the power to be able to make everything from a grant to equity. We have not made equity investments yet. Mostly to date that we've made grants and loans in early stage startup companies. But we have heard from the industry and we have heard from startups that there might be some interest in us making some small stage, dilutive, in some cases, equity investments to help entrepreneurs get to scale a little bit more quickly. But perhaps more than anything else that we've heard that really works in building an innovation ecosystem has been our focus on education, workforce training, and ensuring that our Massachusetts students are the most skilled workforce in the United States of America. We work to ensure that there is a very wide, very efficient pipeline from middle school all the way up through college and into graduate school. We pay and we've reimbursed for capital equipment, for disposables, professional development. We have a high school apprenticeship program for high schoolers to intern with companies over the summer, and we have a college internship program where we reimburse companies for internships, and so far we've created over 3,000 of these internships in the past 7 years. We hear all the time, particularly from our younger companies, that without these internships and apprenticeships, they simply would not get the job done. So that's just a snapshot of some of the investments we have. In terms of our methodology, the last thing I'll say is we do very much follow Michael Porter's cluster theory, in that we invest in anchor institutions, believing that anchor institutions are the source of sort of radiating economic impact in developing innovation clusters. So to that end, we do not just invest in Boston, Cambridge. We have very vibrant clusters developing in Merrimack Valley, for those of you who are familiar with Massachusetts, up near UMass Lowell, in Worcester, in and around UMass Medical, which is one of the highest receiving NIH grant recipients in the United States. In the South Shore and the North Shore, because we find that scientists want to live in these beautiful areas, and there are academic institutions there, so we cluster there. this theory, Michael Porter's cluster theory, does have a degree of legs to it that we believe is applicable in the life sciences. And we've been sort of proving that out over the past 9 years, and will continue to do so going forward. It's all yours.
Thanks. So I'm Ying Tam. I'm the Managing Director of Health Ventures at Mars, Mars Discovery District in Toronto. So we are one of the largest urban innovation hubs. So we typically map ourselves to Mission Bay in San Francisco, or the Bridge in New York, or maybe the Crick Institute in London. So we do think place is important, but that's not what I'll talk about in this particular session. So our mission statement is to help innovators change the world. And so we focus on 4 different industry verticals. Industry verticals where regulatory and system-wide issues are a problem, because we think we have the skills and the resources, and we're organized in a way to try to address some of those in that uncomfortable area. And so those 4 areas are health, clean tech, work and learning, and finance and commerce. I actually run the health portfolio. So even then, we don't think that thesis is enough. So there's 2 aspects that we've really focused on. One is the concept of trying to get the scale up. So there's been a lot of work around the startups, and I think the latest statistic I saw was that Canada has the most number of startups per capita than anywhere else in the world. So more than Israel, more than anywhere. Maybe it's because we have a small population, I'm not sure. But the reality is that 8 or 9 out of every 10 companies still fail. So that's what the research still says. So we are working on this concept of implementing a program that gets companies to scale. So we still are at tremendous volumes. We have 350 companies in the portfolio. 200 of them are still in the early stage, I would say, but we're trying to move the 150 or so aggressively through to scale, and we've developed programs around that. So the idea is to have the right program focused on the company at the right time of their stage of development. The other thing is that we've really focused on is convening an ecosystem. So we think that so we're not an incubator or an accelerator. We partner with JLabs, which is a great incubator, great facility they've built out. We partner with Techstars Cedars-Sinai, so they come to the building, to Mars, but we're neither of those. We try to convene an ecosystem. So that ecosystem is the entrepreneurs, a network of investors, the government and the key stakeholders, providers and payers, obviously the patients, and very large corporates that play in the health world. And so we think that all of those are what's important in driving an ecosystem forward. And then the last thing is we built an organization that kind of supports all of that. So we have 3 funds. So we do seed funds that do invest. They invest up to $250 in the first go, and then 2 of the funds can top up again another $250. So small seed funds. One of the seed funds is funded by Richard Branson's Virgin Unite. We have a solutions lab that focuses on design thinking, and we have Data Catalyst organization. So organizations around Mars that helps support the mission. And so the Data Catalyst, obviously data is a critical part in trying to remove some of the systemic problems, and so we have a group that works on that. So that's Mars in a nutshell.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Larry Tsai, and I am the head of business development for Qilu Pharmaceutical. First of all, we're new kids on the block in terms of innovation scene. Qilu Pharmaceutical was founded back in 1958, and it's a very humble beginning, but it has had a very tremendous growth in the past 35 years, and really taking off in the last 15 years. Right now, its annual revenue is about $2.1 billion US dollars in 2016, and it's really making an effort in terms of getting into the innovation. And to that respect, we are sort of, in a way, trying to emulate industry giants who has been very successful in that regard, namely Johnson & Johnson, in terms of setting up the ecosystem and really foster the innovation. When we look at the footprint to get into the innovation, we look at United States versus Europe and everywhere else, and really believe the what's the most innovative and also just cutting edge is still in the United States. And when we look at the areas, the Seattle, the San Francisco, and Boston, we make a conscientious effort to get into the leading place, the number one in terms of innovation, which is in Boston, in Massachusetts. And it's just so, Travis just made the the announcement about the Life Science Initiative 2.0. Governor Baker just announced, but when we look at that, it was still in the 1.0 stage under the leadership of then Governor Deval Patrick, and we look at what it can do to help us, and also on the flip side, what we can do in terms of helping to make this ecosystem a better place. So we sort of like to bring in a little bit of a ecosystem with a little bit of twist, where we just opened our Qilu Boston Innovation Center, and Travis was graciously enough to be present and also address the crowd. And the way we look at it is, China is a tradition. Traditionally, it's in terms of innovation, it's not that up to the speed, so to speak. But we have a lot of resources, both from private industry as well as from government, for a push into the innovation. So we want to capture that trend, and also in terms of leading that trend to leverage that into where it's needed.
Apologies.
Governor Baker?
He's topping up that $500 million.
Yeah.
It's $1 billion now.
Yeah. There we go. Here.
You can't take first class on.
Yeah, so the way we set it up is we both want to be in the epicenter of life science innovation, but also with an eye on the tremendous market in China, where there are a lot of patients still don't have the access to the most innovative, and not even just the most, the sort of 5 to 10 years ago, it's already very common treatment or therapeutics in the U.S., where we want to bring those back to the huge patient population to really bring up the standard of treatment for a tremendous group of patients with a large medical need. So we sort of like to call ourselves a little bit of a JLab light. If that's I don't know if there is a trademark or anything on that. We like to do it.
There might be a trademark.
Yeah, so we won't really call it that. We just call it QBIC, Qilu Boston Innovation Center, and then truly leverage the tremendous talent and also research in the Boston area. And in terms of the collaborations we are looking to build, we really run across the board from, Stephanie mentioned earlier about sponsored research to individual entrepreneur or a little bit of established biotech companies. We are open to talk to them, and in terms of a drug development cycle from early stage all the way to clinical stage, it's really something, it's more about what this particular program can help with patients in China. Eventually we will get into the world market, but we're taking baby steps. We don't want to bite off more than we can chew, so we are taking just dipping our toes in the river, in the water, try to see what we can do, not only benefit but also contribute to this ecosystem, both in the Boston, Massachusetts, and in the U.S., and later on for the global stage.
Great, thanks. That was quite an overview from everyone as to what each of these innovation ecosystems look like. I think one of the things that I know companies and always ask is, in early stage companies, is there's this progression obviously from seed stage to kind of grown up, meaning venture eligible companies. But it's the in-between that is the big valley of death, which is there seems to be a lot of seed stage capital out there, but getting that next 1 to 3, 1 to 2.5, it's really, really hard and problematic. So, that's one of the things that is still unsolved in my book, from where I sit, because everyone keeps coming to me, and we don't help there, unfortunately, but we need to get a better solution, I think, as a system, in order to provide better access to that, I think, more than anything. So I wanted to kind of throw that out, and I know J&J probably has a leg up on this. There's a shock that may answer to it, but I know it is something that your companies, that you all see, deal with, and kind of what you've seen that may be out there that may be an answer. It may be partnering or working better with private groups or smaller funds or something along those lines. I mean, the angels, I don't know that the angels are going to be the solution. I think it's too spread out. There's too much due diligence. They need to move quicker. I think I don't think it's the right fit. It sounds to me like it's got to be a smaller fund, dedicated fund, but I'd like to hear your inputs.
Thanks, Colin. I'll take a first crack at it. It's absolutely true that there is still no magic solution for the valley of death in terms of crossing over the translational part. And the biggest hurdle when we see is, when we evaluate the project programs is, what kind of data you have right now, and where do you make the jump from the in vitro to in vivo, and then later on the data, the efficacy, the PKs, the talks, all those kind of nitty-gritty stuff. That truly is the biggest challenge in terms of translating the ideas from the scientist's mind into sort of the first step become a reality. That things jumping from the petri dish to the animal data. So in that regard, I think when we set up QBIC, the Cubic, we make a conscientious effort of having what we call a anchor company in there. We invested in QLB Biotherapeutics, which is a biologics company, therapeutic company focusing on immuno-oncology. Even though it's a very specific area, but it has all the necessary tools and you name it for a company to do all kinds of testings. We acquired a facility in Brighton, which is just a part of Boston, just across the river from Kendall Square. It is a two-story building and a lab space. It used to have a chemical hood, but we decided when we renovated the place, we decided not to keep them because you can really get your chemical synthesis anywhere, very easily. So we want to provide a space where you can do biological assays and to do the testing in vitro. And also on the second floor, we do have a in vivo facility, a vivarium, and we can help bridge from the in vitro part into the in vivo. And so I like to use the analogy of this almost like a shopping mall. You need to have an anchor store that will provide efficiency in terms of instrument utilization, the consumables, all those synergies you can have, instead of asking the startup companies really to go out to managing their own, where we can really provide the most efficient, the effective ways to really speed up the from discovery to development.
So that is a complicated question, and we look at it with essentially 4 different lenses. So I think the reality is that we have 350 companies in the portfolio, and I think the harsh reality is that they're not all VC investable, and it's just a reality. 350 companies is a lot of companies, and every one of them, 90% of them are looking for money right now, or they will be in the next 6 months. It's just not a reality. You think about a VC that only does 4 deals a year, or angel groups that say they do, they look at 4 a month, but they probably only, cut 10 deals a year. There's not enough to go around. So that's just a reality. So we work really, so the first lens we do is in terms of readiness. So we work really aggressively with the entrepreneur to make sure they're ready. And it may be investment. So we work really hard on their deck, their pitch, their positioning, their strategy. But it actually might be that their best investor is their customers. So is there a way to get to revenues faster? So we do a lot of work around that. The most obvious is to work with angels. So we have contemplated, so we have an angel strategy. We've contemplated actually developing an angel group inside Mars. In the clean tech space, they do a lot in the portfolio. They do a lot of work in that. They convene monthly meetings. They have a whole network of angels. We're waiting to see how that unfolds. The reality is actually there's only been 1 deal, and they've been working on it for 2 years. So we're not sure that's the right road. The thing that we're doing most aggressively is trying to create a network of investors. So we do a lot of outreach. We use this event as a great way to connect to investors. We host one of the Resis, the one in April, is at Mars. But we also do a lot of outreach. So, Horizon Ventures, which is from Hong Kong, came to Mars 3 times last year, and they've invested in 10 to 15 of the Mars companies. We had Sandbox come 2 times last year, and they haven't made any investments yet, but they're watching some of the startups. And FCA Ventures from Nashville came a month ago, and now they're watching 4 of the companies. So we work really aggressively to try to make this network happen and try to make sure that they're engaged and see what our portfolio is doing, and hopefully interest them. And part of that is that we're looking for VCs that are earlier stage. I mean, hopefully they have money and they'll deploy more of it because it's smaller amounts versus the 10 or 15 or 20 million that a Series B VC might want to deploy. So we continue to do that. And then the last thing we do is we work aggressively with the corporates. So obviously the ones that have money, like Johnson & Johnson. We had Fosun from China come 6 weeks ago, and I think they said they were looking for a small project, and I think they said they wanted to deploy 200 million. That was a small project for them. So we're really outreaching aggressively to corporates as well as a way to try to bridge this valley of death, because it is significant.
I couldn't agree more. It's the problem's not going to get any better. That's, in my opinion, that's the bad news. All of the venture capital firms with whom we have relations consistently tell us that they're looking to mitigate risk by either not going very early, or in some cases trying to put innovation behind the garden wall, sort of, by going out and hiring partners or hiring staff from the large pharmaceutical companies and taking on projects themselves. So not even dealing with the innovation ecosystem whatsoever. So the way we see it, the way I see it, the problem's not going to get any better anytime soon. So 5 things in terms of what we've seen work are: 1, continuing to educate family offices. think a prior session was about family offices, getting family offices more sophisticated in understanding the risk profile of life sciences companies and getting them to deploy their wealth in a very targeted and strategic way in a portfolio-based manner is something that we see as being a potential bridge for this $1 to $3 million range. Not the large-scale investments, but again, this scale-up investment. The second is philanthropy. So last year in the United States, about $2.4 billion was deployed in philanthropy in the life sciences, and that's going to just continue to grow as philanthropic investors get more sophisticated themselves. Chan Zuckerberg is obviously the 800-pound gorilla, but there are other foundations, like locally in Massachusetts, the Smith Family Foundation, that again, that are looking for these targeted, smaller level investments in the life sciences. Third, as was mentioned, Ying mentioned, is the company investment funds. So we have 16 or 17 of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world with a presence in Massachusetts, and pretty much each one of them has their own native investment fund to invest in projects in Massachusetts. Sanofi, for example, right now is very interested in investing in microbiome research, and Massachusetts is the nation's leader right now in amounts invested in the microbiome. So we look to Sanofi to fill that gap on the scale up. Fourth is leveraging federal funds. So we have a program through the Life Sciences Center that we've dubbed MassRamp, where a gate for even being evaluated is whether or not companies have received the equivalent of a Phase 1 SBIR, STTR grant. That allows us to assess the seriousness of a particular proposal. There are lots of different ways, lots of different lenses you can assess that. Looking at federal fund recipients is just one of them, but again, that allows us to figure out how to concentrate our early stage investments for growing to scale as if you've been validated, if you will, by the federal government. And the last is we've born in Massachusetts a new kind of incubator. It's not an early stage incubator, it's a scale-up incubator. The name of it is Mass Innovation Labs. And you can think of Mass Innovation Labs as a early stage startup company's COO. They will help a company go from graduating from a Lab Central incubator type of organization into IPO in about 12 to 18 months. That's a completely different model than the industry is accustomed to, and that's probably one of the most effective ways that we see right now helping companies get across and through the valley of death and to a fundable moment.
What was that?
Mass Innovation Labs is the name of it.
Yeah, I guess maybe a different flavor to thinking about this. I think one of the things that you generally see when companies are kind of hitting that tough window is the whole point of are they fundable, and what are the things that get them to the point of being fundable. I think that this whole concept of innovation ecosystem is a big piece of helping them, in the sense that companies often need additional education to understand what are the critical de-risking experiments that they need to be doing. Often we see companies that are going down trajectories that maybe don't really make sense from a commercial perspective or a de-risking perspective. So being in these environments that really both get them shoulder to shoulder with people who've been through it before, that have educational components that help them to understand better what are the key questions that they need to answer, getting them exposed to VC networks that can also give them guidance on what they would need to see, the incubators that take out some of the costs so they can maybe get to that point on a lot less money. Those are all really critical as well. So I think that the incubator networks and these ecosystems and the things that, for example, Travis's team are doing to seed these different regions is really key as well. You think about like Houston or Texas, the government even played a role there not dissimilar to what Massachusetts is doing, where they have these secret grants that are big grants that are luring people from coming from Massachusetts or, the Bay Area to come there because, they're $3 million grants with no strings attached. So that gets, otherwise, you don't, it's very hard to dislodge an entrepreneur from an area where, if their startup fails, they can turn around and find something else. So how do you get them into these places where it isn't, full of these really successful startups? So there's different clever ways that people are doing things like that. And then, maybe not so much in the sort of drug development space, but the therapeutic development space, but certainly on the device and consumer side, there's some clever things that entrepreneurs are doing that are even like crowdsourcing or offering up, early access to their product, where it may not be available for a year, but you get to, get in on an early deal if you, put some money down now. Are ways that they're bringing in funds that aren't necessarily being driven by VC. So those are just some other flavors to kind of throw in the pot about how to help get those companies to that point where they can be fundable.
I think that's a great point about when are they ready for money. So I think I mentioned earlier that we've done an aggressive job of segmenting our ventures. So 200 of the 350 are still quite early. We did that because in the early days, in version 1.0 of Mars, anybody who had a startup came to Mars, we let them in, they put up their hand, we gave them more time, and it just wasn't a scalable model. So we've done a really aggressive job of stage gating them now, and the start companies are a many-to-one model, where we just give them training primarily. So there's Entrepreneurship 101, which is actually something like 10,000 people sign up for it. We've kind of made it like a Coursera or Udacity kind of program now. It used to be delivered real time. And same kind of metrics where, maybe 10,000 sign up and 500 graduate or 200 graduate, but it's the same kind of model. But it's a many-to-one model, and then we have all these workshops which are about their sales model, their revenue model, the lean startup. It's 6 companies in a workshop, and I think, those early companies really need a lot of, before they get to see the big money or try to go for the big money, they need a lot of training.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we've got about 10 minutes left, so I wanted to open it up if anyone has any questions. This is an interesting topic with a lot of different facets and can go many different directions, but I think we'd like to open it up, and if anyone's got something, we'd love to hear it. Yes?
So I wasn't at the family office session earlier today. I don't know if it was in this track or the therapeutics track, but I guess a question I have about family offices is if that's one of the potential solutions to address this valley of death range of funding that many companies are seeking. There's a timing issue with educating family offices, and a new term I learned last week, ultra high net worth individuals. I thought everyone is high net worth, but apparently there's ultra high net worth. So these UHNWs and family offices. So there's, how do we address the timing of educating these family offices and ultra high net worths? Because a lot of them are hiding behind the curtain, so to speak, don't want to come out for obvious reasons. And the timing of some of the companies today, or even in the near term, seeking funding, because otherwise, in the absence of this $1 to $3 million to $2.5 million funding, they go away. And the second portion of that is there anything we as a community can do to facilitate family office to family office discussions? Because if someone sees that this family office or ultra high net worth or high net worth individual has invested, that gets the next family office a little more comfortable coming around the table. So how is that happening? Is that happening, or what can we do to facilitate that happening?
I actually can take I'll take a lead on this, and then I'll actually relate it back to something that we talked to up in Toronto a year ago. It's an interesting subject. Family offices, first of all, I've spent years with family offices, and I've got a lot of background in it. There's this misnomer that there's just walls of money, and I ran that panel in case anyone was there. But there is a lot of money in the family office segment. However, investing into this particular space for family offices is not only difficult, in many cases it's contradictory. They have mandates that vary differently, family to family. It makes a big difference whether it's first gen or second generation. And the labor intensiveness of investing in this is probably the equivalent of all of the other asset classes combined. So you see many family offices will just, and they don't have to. There's no rule. I don't want it. Okay, over here. So the amount of family offices investing in emerging life sciences is we've found somewhere less than 10% of all family offices in the United States, as a rule of thumb. It's still a lot of money. The other thing too is you see about, let's say, I've got $1 billion family office. Well, $1 billion family office, how much do they actually invest in emerging life sciences if they're doing their job? It's not a lot of money. You're talking maybe 30 million.
Annually?
Yeah, but okay, 30 million, now let's back it down. I still need to reserve money for follow-on, so that's about half. So now you're down to 15. And then the question is I've got a portfolio of that, so I can, you can't just invest in one. So now we're down to, 1.5 million, maybe 2 million, and I'm doing 10 deals, 8 deals. Processing 8 deals is very difficult. It's hard. I think your second point, and in terms of educating family offices, good luck. I mean, if they want to be educated, they'll get educated. Okay? It's more a question, I think you touched on it, is family office to family office working together and collaborating. Because family offices will look for return if it's there and it makes sense. They will follow other family offices if they're doing it well. Why not? So then the question is how do we encourage that? And that's problematic because, as you touched on it, most of these family offices, they don't want to talk to me. They want to talk to other family offices. And it's not that easy. Now, there's these family office conferences and stuff like that, and there may be better ways of doing it and approaching it. One of the things in Toronto is you have to develop this culture where entrepreneurs and stakeholders collaborate. They work together. They become a network. In Boston, it's been going on so long. For a company, for a guy or a gal that's got some experience, they should be able to make a few phone calls, and then those few phone calls turn into some others, and that's how that valley of death is overcome. We were talking about in Toronto, we had a seminar up there about 1.5 years ago that I was speaking to, and they were addressing exactly this. How do we get people just talking? And there's a lot of ways to do that. And Toronto's done, just in a year, unbelievable job of trying to get people communicating about emerging life sciences because it's traditionally been a natural resource-driven, wealth-based economy, if I had to say. So it's changing a lot. But, those are just, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, and it has to do with the nature of the constituents. It's not that they're like an individual. So, anyone else can comment?
The only addition I would say to that is MassBio has begun, so our state trade association for the life sciences has begun down this path. The very first gathering that they had, they fielded about 75 family offices, and not just from Boston, from all over the United States, of folks that were interested in learning about this field and this space. My inclination is let's not rush the process because more than anything else what you want is good money, and let's not rush the process because more than anything else as an industry we want a long-term engagement with family offices. So let's take the time to be sophisticated, educate family offices as to the correct risk profile of this industry. And if and when that moment happens, when these family offices start en masse making investments, not in a boutique sort of a way, but en masse, I think we'll all be the better for it because we'll have sophisticated investors walking alongside us.
Yeah, I think the one thing about family offices, you can't push them. You start selling family offices, the walls go up.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, and given that this is an innovation panel, to bring it back to that, I mean, clearly all of you play a big role in perhaps, I mean, I use the term education loosely, if they're educated, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have the money they do, but, you know.
Let's hope so.
Perhaps, you know, some of the panelists and the groups you represent can play a part in that. And
Yeah.
maybe that's already
It's,
being contemplated and underway.
I think
but-
everyone
Yeah.
gets it.
Yeah.
And everyone's working on it. It's just hard.
Yeah, I would say that when I referred earlier to our angel strategy, that essentially is around the high net worth individuals and the family offices. And we have done a lot of work in this space, and it is hard. And I think that as entrepreneurs, and I used to chase family office money as an entrepreneur, it's really premature. I mean, it's really early. And so in our angel strategy, when we try to convene these sessions, it's primarily focused on two things. One is this education piece, because they mainly have been, the family offices, at least in Canada, have mainly been focused on the things that they feel more sure about. So natural resources, now there's a lot of family offices that are focused on IT. So it was really education around the industry, the life sciences industry, and then education on risk. And I shouldn't say education because, yeah, they would get offended. It was just information about those two things. And I would say that we have had some success, but it is long coming. Like the success mainly has been in the clean tech space. I mean, they've been working at it longer. There's only been one investment as individual high net worth people, but we actually were able to pull together a bunch of them into a fund, a $30 million fund, and now it's going to, the next one, which it might have closed already, is $70 million, focused in clean tech. So it's a bunch of these high net worth individuals still not wanting to absorb the risk by themselves, but pulling together into a fund. So we have some success, but I think that, as an entrepreneur, it's really tough to chase family office money.
Yeah.
It's a long haul.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
And, limited experience, but the bit that I got exposed to at UCSF, a lot of them tend to, when they get outside of their space where they're comfortable, are going through foundations and other funds when they're trying to make those sorts of investments so that they're putting the money in the hands of people that actually have the expertise. So it's a complex industry with long-term ways to get returns.
And then the other thing is, for those family offices who have made some investments in the space and have not seen the successes, i.e. the early wins, that's a huge deterrent for them.
Of course.
For future investment, as well as other family offices they may be in contact with.
And unfortunately, we went through a cycle where in early 2000, you had many family offices go into funds, venture funds, in life sciences, and they got killed. And so you've got Patriarch or someone saying, 2 and 20, why do I do that? And whoosh, pull it back. And then, of course, going direct, as we said, is very difficult. So it's problematic for the sector.
I think there's two other things that are kind of relevant. One is that they're really hard to find. Let's be clear. I mean, you can go to these conferences. It's really hard to find them. They they network with each other, but nowhere else do they network. That's one thing. The good thing is, though, the ones who are investing have an investment thesis.
Yeah.
So if you're oncology and they're oncology, then there's a fit. They made a decision. So the ones that are investing. So at least then it's clear.
I guess the one thing I would say that while I don't disagree with everything that's been said, the conversation is really about the innovation infrastructure and the innovation ecosystem.
Yeah.
And in Boston, I think what makes us unique is the density of our environment. It is the general level of education in the life sciences. And while I completely and totally agree, the level of sophistication of our family offices already is such, and in many cases, this wealth was generated in the life sciences. So, you know, when these ecosystems start to mature, I think there is a parallel track for ensuring that all areas of capital availability can be redeployed within the life sciences ecosystem.
Yeah.
That includes the family offices, it includes the private foundations, it includes the patient foundations, it includes the community foundations. I mean, they each have a separate role to potentially play in supporting your work. And what I see different is that for the very first time, I do believe that we're putting the family offices as a chess piece on the board. And that's new, and I think we should continue to pursue it. Yes, is it difficult? Absolutely, but you know, when we are working with these offices with impact investing, or we're working with these offices or any new area, it's totally difficult, and I think we should welcome the opportunity to have those sorts of conversations through whatever medium this is possible.
I wanted to give a note of hope, and then we have to go. A note of hope. The other thing too is there. I had a conversation with some folks at some very large family office complexes, and one of the things that they're finding is addressing this new thing of millennial wealth, which is going to be in the next 2 to 3 years one of the biggest issues that the financial system is going to have to deal with, because they want their money managed differently. And a lot more of it is going to be actively deployed. A lot more as a percent. That doesn't mean, it'll be a lot more in total, but it's going to be a very different way of dispersing money back into the system. So it's a good thing, let's put it that way. Hope more 25-year-olds make money. I hope my son's one of them. Thanks so much, appreciate it.
I hope